You won't believe what my husband's cousin said at dinner. I thought it was just another chaotic family dinner. You know the kind, the ones we've all survived. Where you have the forced smiles, the passive-aggressive compliments, and that one relative who always drinks a little too much. But this dinner was different. This was the night a single sentence from my husband's cousin didn't just silence the room, it ripped open years of old family wounds for everyone to see. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And in that suffocating silence, I realized my life was about to change forever. Before we get into how that one comment unraveled everything, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe, because you're going to want to hear how this story ends. To give you a little context, my husband Mark's family dinners were always a performance. They weren't just meals, they were showcases. His mom, Brenda, would spend days cooking a feast worthy of a magazine cover, and the unspoken price of admission was to play your part in her perfect family portrait. The pressure to keep up this illusion of a happy family always made these get-togethers incredibly stressful. It felt less like a time for bonding and more like a stage for emotional warfare, where every unspoken issue was just simmering below the surface. That was the Henderson family dinner in a nutshell. I'd been married to Mark for 3 years, and in all that time, I never quite found my place at their table. I was the outsider, and they never let me forget it, not with big insults, but with 1,000 tiny cuts. It was in the way Brenda would serve me last, or how she'd talk about Mark's ex-girlfriend Sarah, with this wistful sigh. Sarah was the ghost at every family gathering. The one that got away. According to family law, Sarah was perfect. A high-powered lawyer, a marathon runner, a soup kitchen volunteer who also, apparently, made the best artisanal sourdough on this side of the Mississippi. She was the standard I was constantly, and silently, being measured against. Mark always told me I was imagining it. They just need time to get to know you, he'd say. Or the classic, that's just how they are, don't take it personally. But it felt personal. It felt personal when his Aunt Carol asked me for the 10th time what my little blog was about, even though I had a full-time career in digital marketing. It felt personal when his dad, George, would only talk to me about the weather before turning his full attention back to Mark. And then there was Chloe, Mark's cousin. Chloe was the family's truth-teller, which was just a polite way of saying she had no filter and a mean streak a mile wide. She thought she was being brutally honest, but her honesty was always aimed at whoever she decided was the weakest person in the room. For the past 3 years, that person was me. She'd make little digs about my clothes, my job, my laugh. Each one was a tiny paper cut, small enough that if I reacted, I'd look like I was being too sensitive. "I'm just joking," she'd say with a smirk, and the whole family would laugh along, leaving me feeling like the punchline. So, on this particular Saturday night, I walked into my in-laws' house armed with a bottle of overpriced wine and a smile I'd been practicing all day. I was determined to get through the night without an incident. The house smelled like roasted rosemary and Brenda's expensive perfume. The usual cast was there: Brenda, running the show from the kitchen, George, already with a scotch in his armchair, Aunt Carol, ready to pounce with the latest gossip, and Chloe, holding a glass of red wine, looking like a cat that had just spotted a mouse. The first hour was pretty standard. I helped set the table while Brenda gave her helpful suggestions on how to line up the forks correctly. I survived Aunt Carol's interrogation about when we were going to have kids. I listened to a long story from George about his golf game. And through it all, I could feel Chloe's eyes on me, just watching and waiting. She was waiting for her moment. Dinner started, and for a little while, it was almost nice. The conversation was light, focused on neutral topics. But the wine was flowing, and with every glass Chloe refilled, that polite veneer started to crack. The small talk began to feel more like a series of tripwires. It's like the dinner table itself remembers every old argument, making it a minefield where one wrong word can set everything off. My mistake was sharing good news. I'd been working on a freelance project for months, a huge campaign for a local nonprofit that I was really passionate about. That afternoon, I found out the campaign had won a regional award. I was proud, I was genuinely happy, and in a moment of stupid optimism, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd be happy for me too. "I actually have some exciting news," I said, trying to sound casual. "The community outreach project I've been managing just won a Horizon Award." There was a polite but pretty lukewarm, "Oh, that's nice dear," from Brenda and a nod from George. Mark squeezed my hand under the table, and for a second, I felt a little flicker of hope. He was proud of me. That was all that should matter. But then, Chloe leaned forward, swirling the red wine in her glass. She fixed me with this pitying look, and a slow smile spread across her face. The table got quiet. Everyone could feel the shift in the air. The hunt was on. "An award?" "That's sweet," she started, her voice just dripping with condescension. "It's so nice that you have your little hobbies to keep you busy." I felt that familiar heat rise in my cheeks. Mark's hand tensed on mine. "It's not a hobby, Chloe. It's part of my career," I said, my voice coming out way tighter than I wanted it to. "Right," she said, drawing the word out. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her wine, her eyes never leaving mine. And then she delivered the kill shot. She turned her head slightly to look right at Mark, but her words were for me. They were for the whole table. "Well," she said, placing her glass down with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. "I guess that proves it. Mark always did have a soft spot for a project. Remember, Sarah was already a partner at her law firm by your age." The room didn't just go silent. The silence was a physical thing. It was like a thick, heavy blanket that smothered all the air, pressing down on us. The clinking of cutlery stopped. Aunt Carol's jaw literally dropped open. Brenda's face, which had been this mask of the perfect hostess, just froze. George suddenly became fascinated by the pattern on his dinner plate. In that 1 second, the perfect family portrait shattered, revealing the tense, dysfunctional reality that was always just underneath. My mind went blank. Then it was flooded. A project. She'd called me a project. Not a person, not a wife, not a member of the family. A fixer-upper. Something Mark took on out of pity, especially compared to the brilliant, successful Sarah, who was already a partner. It was a masterclass in cruelty, one single sentence perfectly designed to tear down my accomplishments and cement my status as second best. The consolation prize. The words just echoed in the quiet. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, a mix of pity, morbid curiosity, and on Chloe's face, a little bit of satisfaction. I felt exposed, humiliated, pinned to my chair like a butterfly in a display case. My heart was pounding in my ears, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, was Mark. I slowly turned to look at my husband, my partner, the man who was supposed to be my safe harbor in this family storm. I didn't need him to flip the table. I didn't need him to scream at his cousin. I just needed him to say something. Anything. A simple, "That's not okay, Chloe." A firm, "Don't talk to my wife like that." I was begging him with my eyes, pleading with him to show me, that we were a team. That I was his wife, not his project. He looked from Chloe back to me, his face a mask of pure, excruciating discomfort. I saw the panic in his eyes, the same panic he always got when there was any kind of conflict. He hated confrontation. He would do anything to avoid it, just to get back to that place of uncomfortable peace. And he did what he always did. He chose the path of least resistance. He let out this short, strangled laugh. A weak, pathetic little puff of air. "Come on, Chloe," he mumbled, giving her a look that was more begging than angry. Let's talk about something else. How are things at your firm?" He changed the subject. He didn't defend me. He didn't object. He just changed the subject. It was a betrayal so deep it knocked the wind out of me, and it hurt more than Chloe's words ever could. Her comment was the lit match, but his silence, his pathetic attempt to just smooth things over, was the gasoline that set my entire world on fire. In that one moment, every time he told me I was overreacting, every time he dismissed my feelings as me not getting his family's humor, every time he chose their comfort over my dignity, it all came crashing down. He wasn't my partner. He was their son. And he had just publicly, clearly shown everyone at that table, including me, where his loyalties really were. He was not on my team. The deep, terrifying fear that the man I married would never ever choose me, he had just ripped that wound wide open for everyone to see. The heat in my cheeks turned into an icy calm. The panic in my chest was replaced by a strange and terrible clarity. Chloe's comment wasn't just a random insult. It was a diagnosis. And my husband's reaction was the confirmation of the disease. The conversation at the table slowly, awkwardly, stumbled back to life. Aunt Carol started asking Chloe about work. Brenda began frantically offering everyone more potatoes. They were all trying to pretend it didn't happen, to bury the ugliness under a fresh layer of denial. But I couldn't pretend. I couldn't unhear the comment, and I couldn't unsee my husband's cowardice. I just sat there in a bubble of silence, the food on my plate turning to ash in my mouth. I didn't eat another bite. I didn't say another word. I just sat there, and I planned my exit. Not just from the dinner, but from the role I had been playing for 3 long years. The performance was over. I let the awkward conversation flow around me for another 5 minutes. I watched Mark join in, shooting me these nervous, apologetic looks when he thought no one was watching. But his apologies were worthless now. They were empty gestures from a man who had just failed the most important test of our marriage. He watched me get torn apart, and his main concern was not for me, but for the social comfort of the room. With a calmness that surprised even me, I placed my knife and fork together on my plate. I carefully folded my linen napkin and set it on the table. My movements were slow and deliberate, and they got more attention than any screaming match ever could have. One by one, they all stopped talking and turned to look at me. The silence was back, but this time, I was the one in control. I pushed my chair back from the table. I stood up. I looked first at Chloe, whose smug look was now gone, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. She had expected tears or yelling. She had not expected this. "Thank you for the clarity, Chloe," I said, my voice completely even. There was no anger, just a simple statement of fact. "You've been more helpful tonight than you can possibly imagine." Then, I turned my eyes to my husband. To Mark. He looked terrified, his eyes begging me not to make a scene. But the scene had already been made. "And thank you, Mark," I said, my voice never shaking, "for showing me exactly where I stand." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I didn't run. I walked with my head held high. I could feel all of their eyes on my back. I grabbed my purse and my coat, and without a single look back, I walked out into the cool night air and softly closed the door behind me. The 10-minute drive home is a blur. I didn't cry. I was way beyond tears. I was in a state of cold, hard resolve. I had spent 3 years shrinking myself to fit into a space where I was never wanted. I had swallowed insults, accepted dismissals, and made excuses for a husband who consistently asked me to set myself on fire to keep his family warm. Not anymore. When Mark finally got home 45 minutes later, he found me in the living room with one bag packed by the door. He rushed in, his face a mess of panic. "What are you doing? I can't believe you just walked out. You completely embarrassed me," he started. I just looked at him. "Embarrassed you?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "I was called a charity project in front of your entire family, and you're worried about being embarrassed? You know how Chloe is. She'd been drinking," he pleaded, using the same tired excuses. "It's not a big deal. You're blowing this way out of proportion." "No, Mark," I said, standing up. "For the first time, I am seeing things in perfect proportion. The deal isn't what Chloe said. I've known for years she's a miserable person. The big deal, the only deal, is what you didn't do." What was I supposed to do? Start a fistfight at my parents' dinner table? "I needed you to be my husband," I said, my voice finally cracking with the weight of it all. "I needed you to say, stop. I needed you to show them I am not disposable. I needed to know that if I'm in a fight, you're in the trenches with me, not on the other side trying to call a truce. And you couldn't do it. You won't ever do it." He finally deflated. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'll talk to her. I'll make it right." "No," I said, picking up my bag. "You won't. You'll smooth it over. You'll get a fake apology from her that you'll expect me to accept, and in 2 months, we'll be right back at that table and it'll happen all over again. I'm done with this cycle." I wasn't leaving him for good, not yet. But I was leaving the life we had. I'm going to my sister's, I told him. And I am not coming back until you figure out how to be a husband. And that doesn't just mean talking to Chloe. It means you confronting her, and your mother, and your aunt, and telling them that the way they've treated me for 3 years is over. And it means you understanding, deep down, that your loyalty is here with me, not with them. He just stared at me, speechless. He finally understood this wasn't another argument he could charm his way out of. This was a reckoning. That night was 6 months ago. I stayed at my sister's for 2 weeks. In that time, Mark went to therapy. He had a screaming match with Chloe that ended their relationship, at least for now. He had a long, hard conversation with his parents, where for the first time, he told them his wife was his priority, and if they couldn't respect me, they wouldn't see either of us. It's not perfect. It's a work in progress. We're in counseling together, and he is slowly, painstakingly, learning how to build a spine. He's learning that being a good son and being a good husband aren't mutually exclusive, but that when he's forced to choose, his choice has to be me. Chloe's comment was cruel, and the memory of that dinner still makes my stomach churn. But in a strange way, she gave me a gift. She gave me the proof I needed to stop making excuses and start demanding the respect I deserve. Her words were meant to put me in my place, but instead, they set me free. So that's the story of how one awful comment at a family dinner changed everything. It was the push I needed to stop being a guest in my own marriage and start being a partner. And I still think about it and have to ask you guys, what would you have done? Would you have confronted Chloe right there at the table? Would you have left with your husband and had the fight at home? Or was the quiet exit the right move? I really want to know what you think, so let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you want more stories about navigating the crazy world of family and relationships, make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for listening.